Welcome to Franchise Killer, a podcast where we pick movie franchises or wannabe franchises, review them film by film, and see where things went wrong.
All right.
Yeah, that was much better. That's what people.
I mean, it was closer than yours.
I love how outrageous that is. Everyone does that exact Arnold Schwarzenegger voice, and it's not even close to.
No, it isn't. No, it has fully become like a caricature of his voice.
Yes,
everyone knows that you're doing Schwarzenegger, even though it does not sound a thing like him.
I just like to imagine like a game. They're like, "Who am I?" It's like, that's all you need to hear.
It's like, there you go.
Oh, Arnold,
you win.
All right, and I'm Reese. Across from me, we have
David.
To his left,
Irina.
To my right,
I'll be back.
That's not a name, but that is a phrase.
That is something.
Do you have a name, good sir?
Terminator.
Also known as
Noah.
And traveling back in time to stop David from giving the mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor a 7, we have
AJ.
Were you successful? No, unfortunately.
Not this time.
And thus the apocalypse was unleashed upon the world. And
I just like to imagine me back in the day when we first recorded that, before AJ even joined us, and just like him popping into your living room. He's like, "Stop."
Stop. What if suddenly we checked our podcast feed or the website and just that episode didn't exist? Like all the other Mummy episodes were there, and then suddenly it just disappeared.
That made me sad.
And then like suddenly we didn't know how to reference it anymore.
It comes up, and we're like, yeah, just like when David,
Wait,
when he,
what did he do?
Lots of
let's
dead
just
air.
move on.
Let's move on.
It's honestly, it's for my benefit.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, we're trying to look out for you. The movie, of course, that we're talking about, because you clicked on this episode and it said the title, is The Terminator, a movie that came out in 1984. Directed by James Cameron. He's making a second appearance on our podcast. Recently, we talked about Titanic, another episode y'all should check out.
Good old Jimmy boy.
Yep, and this was his second film after Piranha 2, The Spawning. Arguably the only bad movie that he directed. It was kind of a... he was brought on to direct just this schlocky B-movie sequel to Piranha, and it's like
Piranha 3D a part of that franchise?
No, that's different.
Okay.
I like that movie because it knows exactly what it is. Yeah, Piranha 2, The Spawning, definitely a bargain bin B tier movie that really doesn't show you anything of what James Cameron is capable of. It's a piranha movie where the piranhas can jump out of the water and kill people. So
Sounds like Piranha 3D.
yeah, but following The Terminator, he directed Aliens, The Abyss, Terminator 2, True Lies, Titanic, and Avatar. So far, 1 through 3, he's confirmed to have completed, and he's kind of on the fence about 4 or 5, but work has been done on those. He recently announced that, I might not direct Avatar 4 and 5, I might pass it to someone else, but we'll see. So yeah, how do y'all feel about Avatar, by the way, and all these sequels that he's involved in? Are you open to it? Did y'all see the new trailer?
Okay,
I saw it.
I saw it, and a lot of people like to hate on it, and a lot of people like to also forgive it. But
Forgive it for what?
I never joined the crowd of hating it, and I don't really understand the hate.
There's no hate.
No, a lot of people actually hate it. A lot of
It's-
people think it's the worst thing, and I do agree it doesn't quite deserve its place as far as highest grossing.
So
it's a good movie.
You keyed on to what it is, Noah.
Yeah.
If that movie had made like a big hit amount of money, like 400 million in the US, it would not have the same hate. The fact that it is on the podium, number one podium with the gold medal,
People
highest
are like, this movie.
grossing movie ever, that is why it has hate.
Yeah.
Like I genuinely...
I think it's also the fact that it's people like, you're going to make 10 movies out of it. Okay, no.
Yeah, I'm open to it. If he brings something new to the table, because I think the first movie is very, as everyone said, like Ferngully and Dances with Wolves. It's just a riff off of that. But it's a table setting movie. If he's able to do something new and not just riff off of another movie that's already come out, then I will retroactively like the first one more, even though I already like it, and just be more supportive of the idea of franchising it. But
about
So
the world.
are we talking about Avatar? Because that's not the movie I watched.
Well, I have a good segue.
Yeah, I thought it was
think
a
it's
movie
been-
about some guy, military guy, and kind of a mecha stuff and a romance. Travels back in time. Well, I don't know about romance. It's just kind of there's a girl involved. I
wait.
guess.
Sounds like you did see the movie, but I'm guessing you did not see
Terminal?
the Terminator. What did you actually watch, AJ?
No, we're talking about Edge of Tomorrow.
Not again.
Oh my gosh,
He
you
did
got it out
He
of
did it.
order.
AJ.
He's seen it 2 weeks in a row now.
What?
Wait, no, he's looping back each
Yeah,
time.
looping. It's the long con.
Okay.
Until he gets the right movie, he's going to keep looping.
I don't know why I didn't put that together. Good job, guys. But yeah, much like Avatar, Terminator is a great example of James Cameron's ability to world build and create a bunch of interesting things. So there's your
Wow.
connection. You like that?
Yeah.
That was a good
I
connection.
feel like at his age, in my mind, it's just, yeah, go for it. I'll watch it. Like, he's having fun with his own story. Why
Yeah.
not, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. So
Explore it a little.
So the Terminator stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, Michael Biehn, Linda Hamilton, and Paul Winfield, among others, and it's written by James Cameron and Gail Ann Hurd. And for those that are new to this show, on this podcast, we first go over our thoughts on the film before revisiting it for the episode. Then we dive into the story, break it down bit by bit, and talk about the more significant moments. Then towards the end of the show, we give our brief reviews and numbered scores, along with an analysis on the health of the franchise and whether or not this film hurt it. So, David, had you seen The Terminator before this episode? I threw it to you because I think you're very foggy on it.
Well, I mean, this is one of those things where I was like, yeah, I've totally seen Terminator. Obviously, everyone has seen Terminator. And even up to it, you're like, you and I were watching it together, Reese, and you're like, I don't know, man. A lot of people get it mixed up with Terminator 2. And I was like, I don't think that's me. Until we watched it, I was like, yep, that's me. I'm that guy.
So you hadn't seen a bit of this.
I have seen parts, clips. I feel like I have seen it on in the background somewhere. I didn't watch it. But like the intro scene with him in that pose, standing up, naked man butt, running through the streets.
Hey, man,
7 out of 10.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, he works out every bit of his body.
Except for the glutes.
He works those out too. Just
Nah, I'm just kidding. He had a good butt.
yeah.
All right, so hadn't seen it. Kind of a fresh entry. I mean, through culture, you'd know bits and pieces of it, but
Hard not to.
it was kind of funny seeing your slow realization that maybe you hadn't
Oh,
seen
yeah.
this.
Maybe I haven't seen this.
Just
I-
focusing on Sarah Connor a little too much.
Yeah, I think I asked you like about at the 25-minute mark. So are you familiar with any of this? And he's like, no.
Really thought
not
I had.
AJ,
thought
how about
the
you?
main guy was John Connor the whole time, and then they're in the hotel. I'm like, oh no.
Oh, no.
AJ, how about you? Had you seen The Terminator?
I had. I think the first 3 I've seen, and seeing 1 and 2 for sure was like something like my dad and I watched together. So I definitely have distinct memories of the first 2, and then a little bit of 3 as well.
Noah, how about you?
I have seen this one before. I just don't remember when.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a long time. I'm certain that either you or my mom or both of y'all have put this on at one point. Because I remember the scenes. I just don't remember whenever I watched them.
I will say at the household, T2 was much more in rotation
Yes.
than the first Terminator. I have
for good
distinct memories of watching T2 multiple times in my upbringing. But this one, I think this one was one that our mom didn't like quite as much as T2, but sometimes was like, okay, let's check this one out. Like, I think
Yeah.
it was put on maybe 1 or 2 times to my recollection.
I can see your mom being like, ugh, Sarah Connor.
We can't be watching
she actually-
the Terminator. It's too scandalous. Here, let me put in The Exorcist.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure our mom really liked Sarah Connor, actually.
Yeah,
yeah.
she does.
Yeah.
How about you, Irina? I mean, I think I know the answer, but
Yep, pretty much same story as you. Yeah, I don't remember the exact time I saw this last, I feel like as far as Terminator goes, there's never been a huge desire for me to go back and watch them all until recently. Actually, before you announced this series.
Oh, really?
Because I feel like anytime summer rolls around, I try to think of, okay, what are some blockbuster franchises that I haven't seen in a long time, or, I'm missing a couple of them out of the lineup, and I kind of want to go through all of them.
Yeah.
And this was one of them, so I'm glad we're doing it.
I honestly see this T2 as one of the pillar blockbuster movies of the 80s and 90s. Like it started with Jaws, and I know that's 70s, but the birth of the blockbuster in cinema. Jaws kicked it off. Of course, Indiana Jones, E.T., all those Spielberg movies, Star Wars as well. But then you think of the other ones that just kept prolonging the blockbusters are a thing that solidified it, were Terminator and Jurassic Park. They were like the second age of big blockbuster entertainment.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a few franchises I'm missing there. Back to the Future, people screaming at me. But yeah, this is like a capital A, or Terminator 2 is a capital A blockbuster. This one was like, this was the proof of concept guerrilla filmmaking, will this thing into existence type of movie. And as I was doing my research, it was kind of funny how many huge movies were brought up on very humble beginnings. The Terminator being one of them.
Yeah.
Well, we discussed this earlier in a sort of comparison to the John Wick series.
Yeah, John Wick. But I mean, Jaws didn't cost a lot of money either, and it was massive.
Well, I was thinking more like the fact that they didn't have a plan for like a 4, 5, 6 movie trilogy sequel.
But I mean, think about it: Evil Dead, Halloween, all those movies made on less than $1 million, like just in the hundreds of thousands budget line, and you look back on them like massive.
Yep,
massive. It's just crazy to think about. It kind of it makes me, I don't know, just lose faith in how movies are made today, or just these massive franchise starters that they just pump all the money into it, and it just feels synthetic and not real. And while it may put butts in seats, it's just not the same as it was.
It doesn't have that same lasting factor that these did.
Yeah. Anyway, that's talk for the actual podcast. I'm just getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
For my part, I also had seen Terminator. I already said it. So yeah, we can move on from that. But David, you want to give us that call to action?
Yes, I would. Wow, what was that?
It was.
Sorry, clear my throat real quick.
It's definitely not Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Nope. Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening to Franchise Killer Podcast. If you come to listen to our podcast today, you need to give 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because if you do not, I will come back into the past and I will rip out your heart and I will eat it in front of your loved ones, because that is what Terminators do.
Do.
Australian Terminators.
What? You were so close.
I know.
Crikey, mate.
You're
It's a
so
long day.
close.
On the last word.
Literally the last word.
Put another shrimp on the Barbie.
But honestly, thank you guys for listening to our podcast. We really appreciate it, because every listen counts. We need more downloads. We need more people liking this stuff. So what helps out the most is going on Apple Podcasts and giving us a 5-star review, because beep, boop, boop, through the algorithm, we get popped up into the front, which we don't get a lot of. And also, we have an Instagram, we have a Twitter, we have a YouTube. Go to all those things. You can call us out on Alexa. You can tell a friend. All those good things you should probably try doing.
Yeah.
You should
just
probably
like
try
that. Beep, boop, boop.
Good job, David.
That's how math and
Beep,
science
boop,
and
boop.
computers work.
That's all.
It was a valiant effort and mostly successful. So there you go.
I'll take it.
With that said, let's move on to that story portion, and we're going to attempt a little thing we did on the Sucker Punch episode. No pressure, Irina. But we're going to try to do the story portion in the 3-act structure. So we've Irina kind of mocked that up, and we're going to go act by act by act. The whole story will be laid out up top, and then we will break out into just a kind of loose but in-depth conversation about the movie. Just don't expect it to be perfectly chronological in our discussion of, from A to B. Like we'll go through the story, and then we'll just have that conversation.
It's sort of like we're digesting it out loud.
Yeah.
You know, all together.
Yep. All right, Irina, you want to take it away with the story?
In the 21st century, a weapon will be invented like no other. This weapon will be powerful, versatile, and indestructible. It can't be reasoned with. It can't be bargained with. It will feel no pity, no remorse, no pain, no fear. It will have only one purpose: to return to the present and prevent the future. This weapon will be called the Terminator.
You're dead, honey.
What day is it? The date!
12th May, Thursday.
What year?
I'm here to help you. I'm Reese, DN 38416, assigned to protect you. You've been targeted for termination.
Why does it want me? Why me?
Arnold Schwarzenegger is the Terminator. Your future is in its hands.
We got Act 1, our exposition, basically. We first see a scene of, it was 2029, so in the future. And looks like a dystopian world, all that jazz. And we're given like a little blurb about
Wait,
how...
Bob Fosse was there?
Yeah, Bob Fosse was there. All that jazz. Of
course.
He was just dancing across the
Doing the hands.
dystopian wasteland. Shoulders up, hands out. Yep. Anyway. So you get a little blurb there at the beginning, like a little stinger to know that this is basically kind of like a machines versus humans sort of war. So we cut to 1984, and we see two mysteriously naked men appear in LA. Both of them happening to look for Sarah Connor. Sarah Connor at this point is a waitress who gets ice cream shoved into her apron by annoying little brats at the restaurant.
I wanted to punch that little kid.
So it's definitely like the, a lowly waitress.
Ma'am,
you
my
know,
order.
who-
Ma'am, I'm ready to
who's
order.
Just, you know,
I know you're
basically-
busy, but no, please, ma'am.
That's accurate,
It is accurate.
by the way.
As someone who works at a
Yeah,
diner.
anyone
Yeah.
that's been in the service industry knows. So, Sarah Connor is a waitress, and she slowly finds out that women with her same name are being killed in the area. So, you know, alarms go off for her.
Imagine
basically.
the terror of
It
that.
kind of,
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it starts off as a bit of a joke because
It
they're like, "Hey,
does.
come check this out. You're dead."
You're dead. Ha ha ha.
That's like finding out a serial
Yeah.
killer. You're in that demographic.
Oh yeah, it's a very small demographic
Insane
too for
town.
the local community. Yeah. So that's going on. And while she's trying to escape, one of these men who has, since we saw them, been clothed, she encounters a near-death experience with the other naked man, now clothed.
I love this description.
know.
She has an experience with a naked man, and then another one with another naked man.
I want to read your thing too, where it says "naked man" and in parentheses now clothed.
This one now clothed. Yeah.
So she goes to this club, and both have kind of located her here. One of them, being the Terminator, is about to kill her, and the other saves her. His name, she finds out, is Kyle Reese.
And he is not a Terminator.
Yeah, he is not a Terminator. He then tells her that both he and the guy trying to kill her were sent from the future. That guy was trying to terminate her, but he was sent to protect her. And thus kind of ends Act 1. That's basically like setting up this whole scenario and conflict. So Act 2.
Yes, I got it right. That's where I had drawn the line.
yeah,
at the
definitely.
end of Act 1.
Yeah, Act 1 is usually you're introduced to all the characters, and then you have this like conflict established. But everything that follows after is basically the meat of this movie, which are a lot of chase scenes and action. So Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor attempt to flee, but are apprehended by the police first because she had called them before she met Kyle Reese. So they're at the police office or the police department.
Yeah.
And the Terminator zeroes in on their location, pretty much kills all the police, no problem. And they flee there in a cop car and take refuge at a motel, planning their next attack, and end up sharing a bed.
Oh.
So that basically sex happens.
Yeah, and I guess this like creates this time circle where that's probably John Connor, huh?
So basically, Kyle Reese, or Reese as he goes by, he tells her that he came to protect her, but he had also simultaneously fallen in love with her because John, her future son, shared a photo of her with him, and he's like, "Ooh, I like that."
So you think John was like, "You're gonna be my daddy"?
Well, yeah, basically.
He just saw him,
basically.
It's like,
"You're my daddy."
I don't want to tell him.
Take her.
You are and will be my daddy.
There's definitely no paradox there. Like, how could he be his dad in that moment if he hadn't yet gone back in time?
There's a secret scene where you see John Connor like snipping the tips off the condoms.
Not today. Not today, Terminator. I will be born.
So anyway, after that happens, Sarah tries to call her mom, and she doesn't know that her mom has been pretty much killed by the Terminator, and the Terminator is mimicking her mom's voice. Mm-hmm. Kind of hilarious, honestly, just seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger talk like an old woman.
Yeah, of course. Honestly, and he kind of makes it work too. I thought it would not look right, but
but he does.
He mimicked it pretty well.
Arnold, take 95.
But so with that phone call, she ends up revealing their location, and so the Terminator is basically chasing them. And once they find that out, they leave with their pipe bombs. He's following them. This is just a lot of action, basically leading to a factory where they finally lure him in, which results in Reese using a pipe bomb to shove into the Terminator, basically exploding him and separating half of his body or whatever. Reese has wounds and eventually dies. The Terminator is
Reese
still...
died?
Yeah, Reese died.
Yeah, we got a new host. It's David.
Yeah, I actually went back in time.
Well, just like you, AJ, I'm stuck in a perpetual time loop, and that's how I'm able to do this.
So cool.
With the Terminator, just a skeleton, only the top half of his machine-like skeleton chasing after Sarah, she pulls him into a, hydraulic press?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And lures him into there, activates it, and basically destroys him. So that's the end of the Terminator.
I love how future AI gets so bamboozled into a hydraulic press.
Yeah.
Knows all the guns on the wall, does all the everything.
It's only 2029. It's not that far.
And it's like,
future.
I can crawl through a hydraulic press.
All right. Ending.
That's the scariest part of the movie. Those things are strong.
They are. Yeah. Have you seen those videos where they're just crushing random items?
Mm-hmm. Love those.
I love those videos. So anyway, that was the end of Act 2. We just got through the climax there, and then the death of, there were a couple climaxes actually.
Is that another joke?
Now, Act 3, which is very short, is we see Sarah Connor several months later, noticeably pregnant. And we know that's probably John because it was established earlier that she would bear a son named John. She is traveling through Mexico and basically taking down audio tapes of to inform her future son of what happened, what will happen, and deciding to tell him who his father is so that he can send Reese back again in the future. And the final scene, there's a kid that takes a photo of her that she finds is the same photo that Reese had of her that he showed her, and further ensuring that she needs to bring that to her son and ensure her son gets born, I guess.
Nice.
So creating a loop.
I had drawn the Act 3 at a different line, but when you actually break it down, it makes sense to the way you did it. Because Act 3 is after the major conflict, and it's the ramping down to the final conclusion. I
feel like some people, when they divide certain stories, that there is a little bit of wiggle room here and there. It's sort of it's kind of like your own perspective in a way, but I think for me, this really did show that a lot of action films kind of have a short outro.
Yeah.
You know,
They
there's
don't
a
have
very
much
short
epilogue.
amount of cool-down time, if any.
Yeah.
Because they did the thing that they wanted to do.
Yeah, it usually ends with the climax and kind of cut to credits, so...
All right. Good job, Arena. Like, a little round of applause. That was a good breakdown of the plot structure there. So let's turn the clocks back to 1984.
Hey.
This little movie called The Terminator's coming out. It was not expected to do super well. Of course, I mean, it ended up doing pretty well, given the fact that it's a franchise. I just want to, and James Cameron was a no-name at this time. And as I was watching this movie, it's easy to be like, wow, a lot of this hasn't aged particularly well. But I was trying to put myself in the feet of people who had seen this movie, and there's so many cool ideas in this movie that are easy to take for granted. Like the idea of having a Terminator be sent, or whatever these things are. Like, imagine there's no Terminator franchise.
Yeah,
it does not exist at this point.
Yeah,
like there's no cliches about things going back in time and killing.
Yep, killer robots, man.
And our first introduction of we open on this massive war. I mean, to the best of their ability, it's a forced perspective shot in 2029. And we see these soldiers just battling it out on this. I think it says Los Angeles, or it says something. Yeah, so that is just instantly attention grabbing for me. As a concept, this is LA. There's also, it's funny, there's two different takes of this modern LA that's just completely gone to shit. So you have Terminator.
Kind of looks like LA now.
Well, you have Terminator and you have Blade Runner, but they're completely different takes on how LA goes to shit.
Yeah.
Where Blade Runner is kind of the more believable one, where it just becomes a just fog-ridden trash.
Yeah.
It's
sort of established that that's the new normal, whereas the one we see here is, this is obviously bad.
Yeah.
You know?
But I'm just trying to put myself in the mind of someone who's just being introduced to this world, and it does such a great job of just grabbing your attention and being like, oh, we're in for a ride here. And then just the introduction of Arnold in this role. He had only been in, I think, Conan and maybe a couple of other movies at this time, so he wasn't a tested star at this point. Mm-hmm. And he kind of saw this as an afterthought role at first, but became fully invested in it after seeing some of the just the footage that James Cameron had shot, and then became a champion of it. So what I want to get y'all's perspectives of this movie, watching it again. What did y'all think about the opening to this film, the establishing shots, and just how we're introduced to James Cameron's world?
I love the way that they introduce the characters. I mean, it's no Terminator 2, but I think for this franchise, I just love. You know you're in for a good story right from the get-go, and it had me wishing that I had not seen it before, so I could see it for the first time and enjoy it more genuinely. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say genuinely, because I still did enjoy it.
Yeah.
But of that time.
Yeah.
You know, how everyone viewed it in the 80s.
Yeah. Well, there's a certain frame of reference that
Yeah.
we're missing because, of the time period we did
We're spoiled.
watch this.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are many times where I wish I could have experienced Star Wars differently because I felt like I always knew the plot twist.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to experience what audiences did where they're like, oh my gosh.
Man, if there was a way that I could just wipe my memory of
Yeah.
certain movies
Yes.
so I could watch them again, I would do that for
Oh,
a
yeah,
couple movies.
definitely.
As
Lord of the Rings.
Well, I would do that, but then with the caveat of being able to get those memories back.
Right.
Because,
But that's a question though. There's risk to that because what
Yeah.
if you wipe your memory and that erases your nostalgia for it,
That-
and then
exactly
you look
what
at
I'm
it
saying.
as something that's
That's
just
why
not
Noah's
very good.
idea works. You get an external storage, plug your memories into that, re-upload
go.
Yeah,
those, and then if
exactly.
you don't like
Okay.
what you got, then you can re-download them.
Yeah, that's how it works.
there you go. Let's get the Elon Musk brain chip.
But
Yeah.
to sort of jump back into this, it kind of does tie into the whole I did not grow up with this kind of early practical set stuff. I didn't really care as much for the intro because of it, but I know if I was in the 80s, because nothing like this had been done, and they did it really well with what they could do, but it's hard for me to detach from what I'm used to. So
Yeah.
I'm like, it's all right. I don't really care about the tri-wheel things, but learning about how they did the shot was super cool.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I like learning about when I gain more respect for things like this when you see how they do it. So
Yeah. And I think a running theme for this episode may be that the Terminator walked so that T2 could run. And I think that's applicable here. But that said, I think Terminator is its own thing entirely too. Like, I see this movie as it's a perfect blend of horror and sci-fi. Whereas T2 kind of drops a bit of the horror. It's still scary, but I identify that one more as an action movie. This is almost, in a way, a slasher.
Yeah, it is
Like
a little bit.
And I did read, and that I was reaffirmed by something Cameron said. He watched Halloween.
I was thinking that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
he was like, oh, what if this,
Slow
but with a
walking.
robot?
Well,
Yeah,
he's like Halloween and Alien a little bit.
yeah.
well, he did Aliens.
Yeah, he wrote the script for Aliens and directed
well, there you go.
Aliens too, yeah.
Well, to go along with that, there were so many shots where, for instance, there was one shot where Sarah Connor's roommate, after just having some fun with her boyfriend, is walking into the kitchen to get a snack. And just that whole setup felt very Halloween.
Yeah.
Like, even the lighting, where it was almost exactly, like, I was imagining Halloween music over that scene. Because I could just see it. I could see Michael Myers just coming out of the shadows somewhere behind her while she's listening to her little
Headphones.
what were they called? Those
Walkmans.
Walkmans.
Yeah.
There you go.
We know we're cool. We know our
We're
old
hip.
school music players.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's very Michael Myers and Jason. There's a Jason element to Terminator as well. In the way he kills people's Jason, the way like a shark meanders through this location with just dead eyes, just killing is Michael. So he's like an amalgamation of two different kind of slasher characters. But I guess let's talk about Arnold here in this role. As being only in Conan, he is definitely not what the modern muscle-bound hero would like. He wanted to play a villain.
Yeah.
He met with Cameron. I think that originally Cameron was like, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna entertain this interview, but I don't want this to work out. And they met each other, and
Well-
I think, go ahead.
I think Orion, the studio, wanted him for Reese's character instead of the Terminator.
Yeah, and Cameron didn't like the idea of Schwarzenegger being in any part of this movie. But
What?
yeah, but there's this funny interaction where like they met, and Cameron was like, this guy's not a Reese, but he is a Terminator. And and the funny thing during that interview, Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't into this idea as much either. But when he was told about, or when he started looking into the Terminator, he's like, oh, I can play the Terminator.
I can
And
play
so
the
they both had
Terminator.
this like realization, but didn't tell each other that, until like a little later that I want to be the Terminator, and he's like, I want you to play the Terminator.
And we're going to make one of the greatest action film franchises of all time.
Yeah, and he totally embodies it. In fact, I think this continues to be his most, or it is his most iconic role, and the role that is most suited to what Arnold Schwarzenegger does well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not talk and run people down.
When you want to take him seriously, is what I'm saying. I think he's really good in other types of action movies as just fun.
I was gonna say I
But-
like the buddy cop, like kindergarten cop kind of movies with him.
Yeah.
Him
But
fish out of water.
But in terms of Arnold Schwarzenegger as a serious presence that you can take seriously,
Yeah.
I think this is the best one for him.
Well, the amazing thing about it is I completely separate this role from all his others. You know, like usually I would think, oh, his performance in Conan, I can't stop seeing Conan just being a villain. But this role was, like you said, the most iconic one in my mind for Schwarzenegger. So it definitely hasn't been affected by any other role he's done before. I see it as completely separate.
Yeah. And since we haven't talked Schwarzenegger, what are y'all's thoughts on Schwarzenegger as an actor and your thoughts on him in this role?
I've only known him as a governor, so I only care about his policies.
governor.
but-
Yeah, me
The
too.
Terminator.
I don't know.
It's for me. I'm honestly confused by him a lot of the time. Where I enjoy his presence in a movie and I like what he does, but I'm like, I don't think this is what was intended. But I'm kind of just enjoying the animatedness
we call
of
that
it.
the rock. We call it the rock effect.
Yeah, it's kind of like the.
That's fair.
It's kind of different from The Rock, though. I think The Rock is. I don't want to say more aware of what he's trying to do.
I will
but-
take Arnold Schwarzenegger over The Rock any day.
Ooh.
Any day.
Well,
like not even
Arnold
a question.
can pick better movies. I think that The Rock has more charisma. But
I don't know about better movies necessarily. He happened to snag some really good ones, but I think Schwarzenegger, in my mind, there's a kind of genuineness that he has that is very almost childlike in a lot of his performances, and that's the appeal in my mind. In this one, that's why it's so different for me, is that you don't feel that at all. And it might partly be because of the way he talks sometimes, you know, that probably affects it. But I don't know. I don't know how to feel about him as an actor. I know how I feel about him in just as his presence in movies in general. I just like it.
I'm not saying he's a better actor than The Rock. Or I think The Rock, if he pushed himself to it, he could be capable of being an amazing actor. The Rock is just so concerned with just playing things safe and making sure everyone's happy. Like he has so many like what's the word? Just
safe.
Yeah, it's just he's in this bubble of like, okay, I'm widely like I'm.
Well, he's kind of like a family man, you know. Like, he's always thinking about his kids and his family when he approaches a project.
Well, on the other hand, Arnie has it made, so.
Yep.
Also, though, he's always playing The Rock. He's not really playing his characters. He's playing The Rock.
That's why
playing characters.
I agree. That's why I like him in the Fast and Furious movies, because he seems a little bit less like his other characters.
Yeah. Well, it's also, you know, that energy matches his energy really well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I just love I do it. It's like a taste test. When I see Arnold on screen, it makes me happy. When I see The Rock on screen, I feel like, okay, this is gonna be fine.
Oh,
like,
come on! I always feel happy when I see The Rock on screen.
I think like, okay, I'm in good hands, but nothing is going to shock me or surprise me.
There's an element of Arnie that's larger than life. I mean, he's obviously built, so that's, you know, the immediate impression you get is a physical presence, dominance, and you know, just he's a monument.
Yeah,
because
literally.
He's got this foreignness about him, the accent, it's a persona, but he also is at least put in situations to force him out of his comfort zone and kind of force him to have a bit of range, whether it's successful or not. But he's diverse, oddly enough, I would say, and you don't really think of that about him. You obviously have the gun-toting action hero.
Right.
But, you also have, Total Recall is great, I think. And True Lies. All of those obviously, is still that action aspect of it. But, it's not all Terminator or Predator or, then you've got Jingle All the Way and Kindergarten Cop where it's, cashing in on the comedic side of it. But he takes it in stride. And so
he does.
I think he's just, one of a kind. Really, that's the best way to describe it.
You can definitely tell he has fun with what he's doing.
Yeah.
He likes the projects he's a part of. And I think that shows on the screen when you watch him. And that's why you get kind of happy when you see him in a movie.
Honestly, that's a good way to differentiate between the two. Arnold Schwarzenegger is almost more about the project. And then Dwayne Johnson is almost more about his image in the project.
Because the project becomes more about The Rock.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I do think with Schwarzenegger, though, he did shift into being more about, like, how do I look in this movie? Like, you think about movies like Commando or just, like, that whole slew of action movies that were just modeled around Schwarzenegger.
Right. It is, and he was a bodybuilder. Like, it's literally singularly focused on image.
Yeah.
So,
but
it's also a dedication and a discipline aspect of it as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a testament to him, though, that he only has 17 lines of dialogue in this movie, and he is the face of this movie. Like, I dare you to find a poster for this movie that features any other character from this film other than him in this role. Like, he knew that he's playing a villain. He's not afraid to get his hands dirty. He's not afraid to pick a role that requires not much speaking. He just oozes this, like, it's not even charisma. It's just he's a star,
But you watch the scenes of him, doing the self repair, cutting his arm open or carving his eye out. Despite the prosthetics and stuff, there's the kind of granite face, stone, just simple dead look, but there's also, something behind that red eye that glows that's given to the character from him in addition to, the visual effects.
Right.
I think so. That sense of danger is really just there. The way he brings it to the screen, I think.
Right.
I agree. Like, and that's not to harp on The Rock again, but The Rock feels like a safety blanket, whereas whereas Schwarzenegger he feels like just a imposing physical force that like I can't really predict exactly how it's gonna go. And I think that's a lot because of Terminator. That's just he picks roles that I feel like he doesn't care if he's gonna be in an R-rated movie where he shoves his fist into someone's stomach and rips out whatever like he does in this movie. Like, you're not gonna see The Rock do that. He's gonna make friends with the guy and be walk off into the sunset.
I talked him into being a good person.
And there's merit to both.
Yeah.
But I will always be partial to Arnold Schwarzenegger unless The Rock starts making more interesting choices. No offense to The Rock, I still like him. All right, so in the movie at this point we have the Terminator taking out a couple of Sarah Connors. Sarah Connors working in the diner, and her friends are not making fun of her. They're teasing her because, oh, look, you're dead. Look, she's on the TV. Sarah Connor's been killed. A second Sarah Connor gets killed, though, and that really alarms her. So this would be a good time to talk about Linda Hamilton in this almost equally iconic role, even though she's not really the face of the franchise. She doesn't get her biggest, I think her evolution as this character is equally as impressive to what Schwarzenegger does.
Yeah.
In this movie, she's kind of innocent. She's almost your, to reference Halloween again, she's almost your Laurie Strode, who starts off kind of, innocent, unassuming, but then is I don't know, put through the trial by fire and comes out on the other end a badass.
And this may be recency bias too. I mean, a lot of this movie, talking about this movie, is kind of fighting against that. But, you know, it kind of goes against the trope now, the cash in of the dumb blonde, you know, the horror that just dies or does dumb stuff. And, you know, she's the embodiment of a survivor. You know, she starts as this everyday woman and, you know, kind of making it, but also just living as an average Jane. And
and it's another great example of this movie walking so T2 can run. Like, this movie bit the bullet and didn't have her as a badass until the very end.
Yeah.
And that's such a cool moment. But then just seeing her evolution from film to film, like, it really bolsters T2 where she's at in that movie, and you believe it, other than you just being introduced to this character out of nowhere. But what are y'all's thoughts on Linda Hamilton?
Oh, yeah, it's kind of hard to really critique this character without thinking of
T2.
her. Yeah, it's like her, and I think that's actually a compliment to the franchise, is that you see her as this one being instead of kind of divided into different kinds. I'm gonna
continuity of character.
Yeah, exactly. But I haven't seen all of the Wow, I almost
Terminator.
said T2. Terminator movies. I won't reveal which ones. But there was a continuity to who she was.
Yeah.
Even if she changed or grew. And there are so many franchises that have the same characters, but they feel drastically different one movie to another.
Yeah.
And you can't just argue that away with, oh, they changed. No, something more happened. It wasn't just that they changed and grew. There was the character feels completely different.
Yeah.
So for her, I really like her, and I kind of like this setting up an origin story of the future hero she will become. Where it's from simple beginnings and not a whole lot of confidence in herself to like attaining that confidence and that capability.
She earned it.
The self-efficacy is what I really like about it. So
like, she's almost a damsel in distress in this movie, and she's not really, but I mean, she's running a lot of the movie.
But she does get the final blow, which is crucial to what makes that character work in the next one. Where my thing is, so I've been comparing this to Halloween a lot. But I want to compare her to Laurie Strode from Halloween, Jamie Lee Curtis. We saw the 2018 Halloween continuation of the franchise, and I really like that movie. But I almost don't believe that character becoming a badass as much as I do as this one.
Yeah.
And I think that's because you don't really see Laurie Strode she does make moves in the original Halloween, but I just don't, I can't draw the connection as much as I can with this one. And maybe it's because the sequel to T2 was much sooner after this one than the Halloween one was.
It might have been.
But like I could almost see in this movie something percolating in her mind at the end that leads to her T2 character. You know? Like that scene where she's just driving off into the sunset, you're starting to see that the change in that character, and it's cool. And I think she does an excellent job. Like it's a role where I don't feel like it's oh, look, this is a huge movie star performance. Look at me. It's I'm not gonna say it's thankless, but it's
humble.
It's like it's the perfect seed to what she would become, and yeah, it's an example of investing in something and then it growing into something better later on. Just kind of biting the bullet for this movie and then it really paying off later.
And I think that, you know, even further, is like, I'm not a huge fan of slasher thriller, you know, in general, but, you know, this movie, I really agree with you that this fits the bill for that. And it appeals to me, and I would say appeals to a broad audience more so than a true genre film of, you know, thriller, I guess.
Yeah.
That because it has that realism of character of, you know, the person, the actual protagonist in it versus just caricatures or archetypes.
Yes, totally agree. So let's fast forward to the kind of nightclub scene where
Tech noir.
Tech noir, yeah, there you go. So the Terminator has taken out 2 Sarah Connors. At this point, Sarah Connor is concerned because there's 2 Sarah Connors who have died. That's not a coincidence. That doesn't happen. So she's kind of on to the fact that I could be a target at this point. And Terminator's approaching her. Meanwhile, we also have Michael Bihn's character, Kyle Reese, coming in for the save. He's the second person who was sent back in time to go after Sarah Connor and save her.
And it's kind of funny how when the Terminator arrives and you see his physique and everything, you're like, oh wow, like he's naked, but also he's huge. And then you see this guy show up, and you're like, oh,
he's a shrimp.
How is he gonna do this?
But that's all the design of this movie.
They sent you?
That's what adds to the I don't know, the tension of it though, because you're like, how is this guy gonna
battle
pull this
out
off?
This
The Terminator's so imposing. But yeah, a couple shotgun blasts later, the Terminator is knocked down for a second. He pulls Sarah Connor out. She obviously doesn't trust him because all of this is insane. But they're able to kind of get out of the scene a few gunshots later. So at this point, we're introduced to Kyle Reese. What do y'all think about this Michael Biehn here in this role as Kyle Reese?
Well, we don't get a lot out of him until later.
We can talk about him as a whole. Okay. That's fine.
I think I'm fine with him. I think he's passable, but there's an element kind of lacking for me where
he's the weakest of the 3.
His character feels a bit one-dimensional for a character that should be a lot more complex.
I'm almost like, what do you see in him? Like, why are you?
Yeah,
because she quickly becomes kind of attracted to him because he's telling her about the future and whatnot.
He saves her.
I think it's sort of implied that there's like this indescribable destiny connection between the 2 of them. They don't really harp on it too much, which is fine. I don't care. Like that's not the whole purpose of it. But I feel like he should have a little bit more charm or intrigue, and it's more like he's all talk than like everything he's saying should be intriguing, but he himself doesn't really convey that intrigue.
And it's interesting because he was cast over some other big names because the necessary aspect for the relationship between him and Sarah. And he does it to some extent. The background of the characters, obviously shell shock, gone through, basically labor camp and survived all sorts of horrors, and just the reality that he is from and lived in is so much different than now. But I agree that, some of that emotion and dynamic would have been nice instead of the always intense kind of, I don't know. And some, especially in tandem with some of the dialogue, it misses the mark where I know that the romance factor was a big thing that was pushed more by the studio than Cameron's original intent.
Yeah, he did agree to it though.
Right.
Like, he had the option to reject.
I agree too
things.
that it helps with the story, but I don't think it was as developed as it should have been. It's either you push harder in it or you take it out completely. And just himself, and I don't know if it's the acting, direction, writing of the character. He's easily written off. And forgettable, honestly.
Yeah, they needed a little more downtime to, I don't know, connect in a way that seemed believable, because the romance of it kind of seems cast aside, and then later movies you're led to believe, like, oh man, I was in love with him. Like, y'all knew each other for what, like 2 days or something? Like, I don't know how long this took place over, but
you have, like, as the franchise goes along, big names like Sarah Connor and John Connor take over, and the Terminator, obviously. He gets left in the dust. Like, he should be a part of, like, the core I feel like, of where they're coming from, and he's kind of like, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
He was there for a little bit.
He was a necessary half of the equation
Yeah.
for John
Yeah.
Carter.
That is the one downside to a first movie in a franchise being a real like low budget guerrilla filmmaking style thing where you just have all these ideas and you're throwing them all out there, and the sequels become bigger and those ideas become more like, oh, you have to hyper focus on these things and extrapolate in a way that wasn't originally intended. That happens with the Terminator. I think that their relationship is blown up in future movies to be more than it was, and so this movie, it didn't realize it at the time, but it's doing some serious heavy lifting for this franchise when like nobody knew
They're putting
for
the
it.
seed.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Literally.
So I
They
do kind
just wanted Reese for his penis. That's all.
thank you. I
Well,
appreciate
actually, it's
Wait.
true.
So are you calling Reese just a sperm bank?
Yeah, they just want him for his chromosome.
that. Thank you, David. Yeah, but let's talk at this point. So let's talk about the action. We haven't really talked about it. It's an action / horror movie, in my opinion, and we've got a whole bunch of action at this point in the movie. A good example of how this movie's approach to practical effects and forced perspective to convey a bigger scale. David, you did a little bit of research on this.
I did a little bit of research.
You want to enlighten us to how these what are your thoughts on the action scenes in this movie and the use of these practical effects, I guess?
I mean, I'm a big fan of practical effects on most movies. This one, definitely. I think that it still doesn't age perfectly.
It's
because
obvious
it's
when
hard.
they're using it, but it's still impressive.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, when Arnold, they built a replica of his entire like upper body and face and everything. They did a full like overly sized thing of his head so they could do a ultra close up of the eye. But the fact is they did the makeup and everything on this latex to look exactly like him, and it really does. Like, it's him, but you watch it in today's, like, maybe back then on the TVs back then when they only had 480p, like, you can't really see the differences, but like when you see it now and
That's a good point, actually, with the 480p.
I mean, I don't know if it was 480. I just know that it's not what it is.
I will say
today.
it was. You
Like
could probably still
480i.
spot it, but it was a lot less obvious back then.
Exactly. And now it's very obvious. You're like, that's definitely not Arnold. It's like a puppet was put in there and then they swapped it out, but it doesn't break the immersion for me. And I love seeing that back then they didn't have the technology available to make a perfectly accurate one. So that was about as good as they can do. And they nailed it. But
Yeah.
forced
At the same
perspective
time,
stuff, too.
it kind of like lends itself to the synthetic aspect of the Terminator itself, this
Right.
imitation.
Yeah.
I think it's the jumping back and forth that's confusing, because then there's a shot where he's in a bathroom, like cutting out his fake human eye, and then it shows the robot eye and everything, and they do that on the model. But then they immediately jump back to him as a human, and you could see the texture just appear on his face in the next frame. You're like, oh, yep, that's the real Arnold.
Yeah.
But it's still really, really effective.
What I love about this movie is you get little teases of to preface this, I think the Terminator design, when it's completely de-skinned and everything's gone and it's just the skeleton, is one of the most iconic, coolest
It's
designs.
So cool. Yep.
And just to see them slowly peel away Arnold's skin, another iconic individual,
Yep.
to reveal this other iconic thing, in hindsight is so cool. Like, okay, he opens up his arm, you see the machinery,
Yeah.
moving his fingers, and then he pulls his eyeball out and you see the red eye. You're slowly getting these peel-aways of, like, you don't know what you're about to get, but you know it's something, I don't know, scary. And when you finally get the full effect of that look, and the Terminator, which took, I don't know, 4 or 5 months to create the actual thing of it.
Well, they built multiple different variations of the Terminator body. They did a full animatronic body double, like the size of Arnold. They did another one where it was like a smaller version of it and made out of, I can't remember what they made it out of, but that one was made specifically for them to blow up so people wouldn't get hurt. They did just the upper body for when it did the tendrils where it's crawling on its arms. Like they made multiple different variations of it, and it's very detailed. Like I think that was even more effective than some of the makeup that they did. But what's really cool is that originally they thought they were going to have to do way more stop motion with it. And
They do a little bit.
They do a little bit, but James Cameron, I think for the most part, thought he would have to do stop motion for most of his interactions when they showed it. Because like, we don't have the technology yet. And they're like, well, we could do some animatronic work. We can make it move and stuff.
Yeah.
And they did. Or they do it where it's like they hide the body cleverly. Gives me Lord of the Rings vibes where they find clever solutions where, you know, the body's crawling, but they have like a stick underneath it where they
kind of miss filmmaking like that.
Well,
it's an art. It's art.
You know, from the next movie, just a little bit of a looking ahead, the liquid metal Terminator was actually a concept that Cameron had created in the original concept work storyline, but he knew that they didn't really have the technology to pull that off at the time, so that's why we don't have that until the second movie.
And I'm glad because if you had to ask me what the cooler design is, as cool as the Liquid Terminator is, I will always...
Look, man.
I will
It'd
always
be like a Capri
stand...
Sun commercial from the 90s.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, those hit different back then, though.
That just makes me think of all the directors and artists out there who have these cool ideas in their back pocket that nobody's ever going to really know, you know, because like he got the opportunity to show that in the second one. But think of all the ideas that people don't actually bring to screen that are really cool, but they just can't, or it didn't make sense in the context.
Well, what I respect about James Cameron is that, well, I mean, I've heard the opposite of him. He's an interesting director, I've heard. But when it came to this movie, he designed the original concept for the robot, right? And he did all of the drawings, the concepts, but he also said, I want more concepts. I don't want just mine. I want to see other ideas. If they're better, we'll go with those. And then they had a bunch of different variations, and sort of the behind the scenes I was watching showed all of these different concept designs, and they even built some of them out in clay and whatever. And at the end of the day, they're like, nah, dude, James Cameron's were just way better, and they just went with his original concept.
Yeah. Like, it wasn't exactly one-to-one the same thing, but it was very close.
Very close.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, did you hear about James Cameron's inspiration for this movie? He had he got sick during the filming of Piranha 2, and he had a fever dream about this metal robot skeleton thing crawling out of an explosion or something, and he just went with that idea.
Confirmed John Connor is real, and he has dream technology.
Yeah.
Confirmed James Cameron does peyote.
But how, it's so funny to think about all the things that lead to a movie.
Yeah.
Where it's so are you telling me that if James Cameron hadn't been sick on the set of Piranha 2, The Spawning, we might not have one of the most iconic franchises ever?
Boom,
this movie rests on a fever dream.
No. Imagine it's it all comes down to this janitor who forgot to wash his hands that day. His kid was sick, didn't wash his hands, and it's this man is the reason we have the Terminator.
It also makes you think, imagine this whole movie is about, time travel, right?
Yeah.
What if time travel exists in the future and John Connor is real, and he was like, hey, AIs, and he was like, we gotta prepare. And then he accidentally sent that memory to James Cameron, which made everyone not take it seriously.
Or
now we're doomed.
Or this is setting us up to be prepared for when Skynet really does. No, there's no way.
Well, we're aware of the issue now.
Yeah, no.
Didn't Stephen Hawking do a test to see if time travel was real?
I don't know.
He
never told us.
He set up a dinner party or something for time travelers.
Yeah, there's something like that.
And he was like, well, if they show up to the dinner party, then time travel.
Hold on. Stephen Hawking, I don't understand how brilliant this man actually is, because he is so smart, and he does was very intelligent. Sorry. He still is. He's still going, guys. He uploaded his brain to the
No, that's
to
the time traveling
Skynet.
aspect.
He is Skynet.
Yeah. But I just like, he does all this crazy stuff where he can break down quantum mechanics and understands the world. And he's like, I'm going to throw a dinner party for people from
Time
the future.
travelers.
Yeah.
I just looked it up, and it was a champagne party for time travelers.
Just imagining all these empty seats. With just poured champagne.
Stephen Hawking's like talking to the butlers, like, make sure to have extra water.
No, I guarantee he was like, time travel's not real, so I'm just gonna make a big spectacle of it.
Yeah,
probably. I think one of the things that, like, the theories regarding time travel is that there has to be kind of an anchor point, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like, we have to make the technology for time travel to be received. So, like, the moment time travel exists, that's the earliest point that you'd be able to go.
Well,
Supposedly.
unless we're in that universe where it's already in the future that came back in time, and we're living in that back in time version.
Yes.
Well,
and
but have we developed one?
We don't know.
And speaking of time travel and AI, I don't know how much research you did, AJ, but did you look at all into the time travel logic of this movie?
Yeah, I mean, it's, this one is one of the more simpler, I guess. It just they go back in time from this point in the future compared to us in order to, well, first the machines do it. So because the machines are about to lose from, this unlikely resistance that is actually about to make the fatal blow to the machines and win it. So in a last ditch thing, the machines send the Terminator back in time, and in an attempt to prevent the birth of the man responsible for the rebellion. So you have basically just one jump
A simple
back.
time loop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you do have, a causal loop where the act of Reese going back in time creates or is responsible for John Connor, who sent Reese back. So there is that loop there. So you got one little
Paradox.
Yeah, the part of the loop that didn't make sense to me is so the original, how did the original birthing of John Connor happen?
Yeah.
Like that's
How did he go back to stop himself if he wasn't already reborn?
Yeah.
Because he couldn't have gone back to stop himself. Like, it doesn't make sense.
exactly. I'm like, that's all I'm saying.
So, yeah, I mean, that's where time, the way we think about time is obviously a human construct describing this natural force, if you will. Not really a force, but it's something that we don't fully comprehend. And then the structures that we use to describe it are within the realm of human comprehension. So, because we observe it in ways that we can sense it and talk about it ideologically in ways that make sense to us, but the ways that it might work that we haven't experienced or sensed, we don't even know. We can only speculate.
Yeah.
So, you have, like, I think, okay, so the Time Machine, H.G. Wells, that's probably the prototypical, like, work of fiction establishing in popular discussion, time travel in fiction. And then you have, sci-fi classics like Asimov, like actually just finished literally yesterday rereading The End of Eternity by Asimov, which is hugely influential. I mean, heck, even like Loki on Disney Plus is like basically rewritten with that story in a DC or Marvel Comics skin, kind of. But so many things people say are unoriginal from time travel, or it's just rehash, but it's just because it's such an intriguing concept that you like to confuse yourself about. It's like, well, when did this happen, or this loop? How did this? It's because, I don't know. I feel like we aren't at a place right now that we understand it fully, and that's just, we have to only speculate. But this movie doesn't really delve into that. It's just basically this interesting kind of twist that you have this photograph kind of being this physical anchor point, like Noah said. And the photograph burns up in the future, but we see the creation of this photograph So it's pretty cool. It's
it could also be it could also be true that the John Connor that is currently being conceived is different than the one that we have from this.
That's exactly what
world.
that's exactly what I was thinking. He naturally would have been born through another person.
Right.
But then, during this, Mr. Horny got in the way of exact John Connor and created a new timeline in which, she thinks, well, I got to name this one John Connor to save the world. And so technically it's still John Connor, but it's different.
He's burdened
Connor
with
squared.
glorious purpose because of his mom telling him so.
A concept introduced in The End of Eternity it's like a minimal necessary change for, controlling time, like going back in time and editing time so that something didn't happen. There's a minimum amount of influence you want to have without disastrous results that would be a reality altering change. But in the end, reality itself has a way of course correcting over, and the further you go in time, the more it stabilizes back to equilibrium.
Right.
So you can have this small little blip where you tweak something and, it's almost counterintuitive because, we're all familiar with like the butterfly effect where, butterfly flaps its wings on, one continent and then that little puff of wind, builds and builds and then creates, a hurricane somewhere else in the world. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have the course correction where you could make this thing that's seemingly trivial but potentially disastrous, changes, but over the grand scheme of things still ends in the same result.
Yeah.
Like Noah's saying. So it's all fun to talk about because, I don't think we really know. And it could be all of the above or none of the above.
You could, if you think about the course correcting thing, it almost seems to, in a way, or it's hard to not think of it in the fact that there is an aspect of fate where things are just meant to go a certain direction no matter what changes it. And like if you imagine how plants grow, they're always trying to grow towards the sun. You put an obstacle in it, it will try to go around that obstacle to still go towards the sun. Like, so the pathway is a little different than just a direct route or the opposite. But it's still correcting whatever that obstacle was to get to the goal.
Maybe there is an end result of what the world has to be, and we're going to get there no matter what changes may or may not occur. So
this isn't,
we solve time travel.
This isn't just a time loop. This is a multiverse.
Wow.
Well, or it's just, a circle. Like it's supposed to be a loop. So it's like the circle of life.
Yep.
And the funny thing is, this is another example of this small movie having to do some real heavy lifting for what T2 does, which it really leans into how all of this works, I guess, and really expands on it. And so we're introduced to time travel, but it's kind of loose in this film, where it's more a vehicle to be an action movie, whereas future installments, I feel like, are more beholden to relying on how this time travel works and the AI side of it as well, which I guess we can talk. I don't think this movie delves into like the Skynet as much and all that, or Cyberdyne and all that.
Right. It just, briefly mentioned, what happens in the future, why it is what it is. It's basically a context setting for the story itself.
Right.
And
we can
in a bottle, Skynet basically is a self-defense system that's heavily integrated into the defense systems of the time, like Strategic Air Command and NORAD and stuff like that. And basically, as is a trope now, the machines decide that the biggest threat to humanity or the world, what have you, is humanity itself, decides to exterminate it all, and is nearly successful until there's, this kind of resistance leader who rises up and decides to stand up for surviving. Yeah.
But what if humans are the result? What if we are the reason for the end of the world,
Who knows?
Well, perhaps we're also, everything else's reason is
it's the end of the world as we know it.
Well, Anyway, we'll have the big Skynet talk in the next episode. I mean, who knows what we're talking about next episode, but
Skynet, it sounds like.
yeah. No, the movie. I mean, whatever.
Who knows?
But yeah,
Edge of Tomorrow.
And we'll also probably be going into time travel as well in that one. But I feel like this is the big one. In Terminator, it's best to talk about the time travel, and in T2, we'll talk about Skynet more because that becomes more of the focus. So at this point in the movie, we have Kyle Reese getting Sarah Connor out of multiple dangerous situations. We have a few action sequences. We have the Terminator doing self-surgery, all that cool stuff. Even though the practical effects are very obvious, it still is kind of fun to look at. I one thing I do want to shout out, even though the special effects are so obviously not real, it adds to the creepiness of the Terminator, like as this synthetic, lifeless thing. So I appreciate it for that, and just seeing that eye show, like him pulling out the eye, and then you see the thing underneath.
Also, they did a pretty good job. Like the eyes are hard to replicate, but when he puts the sunglasses on, it looks like a very accurate bust.
Yeah, it's very good.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I think, as AJ said earlier, just seeing it in high definition really doesn't do it any favors.
It doesn't do it favors as far as blending seamlessly with the previous scene, but it really does make you realize, wow, they put so much detail into this sculpture of him. Like I'm actually amazed by the artistry of it more so than just
me too.
Thinking about it.
Like they actually did this thing.
Yeah, they actually
they built all this
built
stuff.
it.
Same with the actual Terminator. They built a full-on skeletal Terminator thing.
Yeah.
But they consummate their relationship. Then there is one of the few ever daylight scenes in the movie, like the one moment of kind of downtime, I guess, that we get before the finale, and they're kind of like getting to know each other, and there's kind of a bond formed, and you get the sense, okay, there's an attraction here, and yada yada yada. That's
part
when
of
you
that
know
is basically just, I guess, the animal instincts, so to speak, kind of come out when you're in high stress environment. And all that stuff.
Right.
So.
It's also when you know that Kyle Reese is marked for death. I'm like, everything that's being said, I'm like, this guy's not going to make it out.
He puts up death flags all over the place.
After they do it, she's like, well, got what I needed.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this leads into our finale. We have a big cool chase scene with a 18-wheeler. Something that will become a staple of this franchise, just having big 18-wheelers barreling down streets with guns ablazing. Pretty cool practical effect. You have an anecdote for that effect, right?
Yeah, so originally James Cameron wanted to blow up an actual oil tanker.
Oh, gosh.
But the location he wanted to film it at was like next to a police station, and they're like, yeah, that's not going to fly. So they decided to do like a...
I want to hear that pitch. Hey, I've got a big 18-wheeler I want to blow up right next to your police station.
Not even that, an oil tanker. It's like not just a normal 18-wheeler. And so obviously that was a no-go. So they had to rebuild a miniature set, and by it's like a scale, like maybe like a 1/3 scale. I don't know what the numbers are.
Can I admire how you say miniature?
Yeah, we've had this conversation before.
I'm going to say it again. I love how you respect every letter in that word.
In that word, yeah.
Miniature? Do you know how do you say?
Except for the
I
miniature.
say miniature.
I say miniature.
I say miniature.
It's fine. Go ahead.
There
Sorry,
is an
I
A
derailed
there.
you.
But yeah, so they built they replicated the building, which was a bank, I think, to scale. They did, they really made it look identical to the scene they were doing. And I think that truck was sort of like knee height, I want to say, something like that.
Yeah, it's pretty big, yeah.
I mean, depends on your
comparatively speaking
to the actual tanker, yeah. So it was small, but they rigged it with like 42 explosives that was going to blow up from the back and then work its way to the front. And they were pulling it on like a little dolly thing or like a string, something very simple.
Yeah.
And they had this all rigged up, and they were pulling it. And the guy was like, all right, the second they pull it, I have to hit the explosives. So they pulled it. The guy hit the explosive button. But they ripped the front end of the oil tanker off and it didn't pull it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy was like, as he was pushing the button, he was like, no.
Slow-mo.
Yeah. And then like you just see all the explosions go off and everyone on set was like, God dang it. And people were just freaking out about it. And they're just like, Mother God. So they had
Mother God.
They had
Mother God, James Cameron.
they had to redo it all. They even have a video. You can look it up online. There's a video of it going off. It's really fun.
But yeah, they had to redo it, I guess.
Yeah, redo the whole thing, and it looked great. I mean,
It does look great. It's a glorious explosion. I will say that.
and it really does look like the real environment. I'd say that was one of the most successful things they did in this.
Yeah.
Practically. But I do know that the who was it? The creative director or somebody. He was like, to this day, the people who worked on that, like that still comes up, and they have like PTSD. They're like, oh God, it's terrible.
So
Mother God.
this leads into the finale. We are at the warehouse. Kyle Reese bites the bullet in a confrontation with the Terminator. Terminator is blown up into two pieces.
Your idiom there. Bites the dust.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, he takes a bullet, or actually explosion. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
He dies.
He dies.
He takes some bullets, earlier on.
So the Terminator is also blown into two pieces and is even more terrifying as a crawling on by two arms type thing. It's completely exposed. It's all metal skeleton at this point. Which, okay, back up a little bit. I know it looks fake, but I adore the stop motion part of this movie.
I do too.
Like, it's so creepy and unsettling seeing that thing just like
As stop motion is.
Yeah.
We brought this up too when we were watching it. Actually, our dad was watching Terminator with us, and it reminded us of Jason and the Argonauts. With the big
Harryhausen,
bronze,
baby.
Particularly the big bronze figure.
Yes,
that chases them
I
down
forget
the
its
beach.
name, but with the
but
massive thing.
that
Colossus.
it has a similar effect where they're approaching you slowly because they know, oh, I'm gonna kill this thing. They're not trying to rush the process, you know, and that's one of the elements of a villain or a monster that is so chilling to me are the ones that are slowly approaching you.
And
While you're panicking.
and seem not of this world in a way.
They don't seem of this world. It's kind of void of emotion. You're their only target, and they're not going to stop. They're just making a beeline for you. So it's that kind of the uncanniness of the movement with stop motion adds to the creep factor. And I think it really works here.
So Talos was the name of
Talos.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it.
It was gonna kill me if I didn't think of it. You get it?
It's a mix of Talos and the skeletons. I feel like it's
Yeah.
like both of those, an amalgamation
Because
of the
it
two.
looks
I
like a
still
skeleton.
think that might be one of the most impressive cinematic feats for
It is.
like its time period.
It's so impressive.
Definitely.
Call back, shout out to our episode, Jason and the Argonauts. Y'all should check that one out. It's a great movie. If you don't listen to the episode, watch the movie. It's super cool
Definitely.
if you like any form of stop motion, claymation,
or
type
just
stuff.
wanting to make sure you're on board with some of like the big top movies of ever.
Yeah. So we have our final confrontation with the Terminator. It's terrifying as it's crawling towards Sarah Connor. She gets it. She climbs through a press. What was it called? Hydraulic press.
Yeah.
And she makes it out of there. It's reaching out for her. She presses the button, presses down on the Terminator, and slowly crushes it. You see the red eye dim to nothing. It's dead. It's gone. Except that arm is sticking out. Which, another thing, this movie just doing the work for the sequel. Like, they recover that arm, and that leads to Skynet. It's like this. It's cool. That arm is very important to the second movie, but. It's the only thing they recover from the scene, but
and I can't help but just the most iconic scene to me is the end of T2, and I always thought that was T1.
That's funny. The
We
thumbs
can't
up.
bring
Oh,
it
the
up. We have
Foundry.
to wait.
I didn't say what it was. I just said it. I remembered it, and it made me think of this movie.
There's at least 3 Terminator movies that end in a warehouse or a factory of some sort. And then after this, we cut to Sarah Connor. She has a dog. She's got her. She's in a Jeep. riding out into the sunset. But no, sorry, back up. She's getting some gas. A kid who's helping her with whatever she's doing asks like, a storm's coming. And she's like, yeah, I know.
I know.
Also takes
I
the
love
picture.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
takes the picture. Yeah, the iconic picture.
And she haggles with this child $1 off that picture.
Yeah. And
Well, that's how you do it. I mean, I don't know
Or
if you-
well, she knows she's going to get the picture anyway. Just give the kid $5. He probably barely has any money at all.
Yeah. So
Well, she's also making a huge trek through Mexico with just, and she's pregnant. So I mean,
well, you know.
So how do we feel about the end of second act to third act of this movie, the final battle and the teasing of what's to come, even though the filmmakers had no idea that they'd be starting off or kicking off this iconic franchise?
For me, unlike some other movies, the middle portion of this movie kind of like lulled me a little bit. Like it was a little slow for me. The beginning, super invested. And then it kind of wore off. And then, but the second we get into like the latter half of Act 2, I'm fully invested again. You know? And so the rest of the movie, I'm just like at the edge of my seat. So it definitely did some work on that second act, I think.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on the ending portion of this movie, Noah?
I like it. I think explosion nice, Terminator cool. I didn't really care too much when what's his name died, but
Reese.
it's still
yeah,
Reese.
I can
I
tell.
didn't- I
I
didn't care.
can, I can tell you didn't care.
I didn't care too
Remember
much
his
when
name.
Reese died. I mean, it's kind of sad.
It's really hard to remember. Reese
It's like
in
it's
it.
more
The
sad
interesting-
because of her.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is you feel more sad about it because
Yes.
for her sake.
Yeah.
But I think something I thought about with this scenario was that he mentions to her earlier when she asks who the father of her future son is. He's like, "Oh, I don't know. I just know he died before the war," and she cuts him off.
Yeah, it's kind of sad.
Yep.
I think there's an element of him that's okay with dying, because think of the turmoil he's lived with since he was a child,
Yeah.
and getting to a point where he realizes, okay, I can defeat this thing and then I can move on, kind of a thing. Like I think it makes sense that he would be the sacrificial character because he feels like he's accomplished his purpose.
Do you think
and
he
he's
realized
struggled
it at any
for
point?
so long.
Like, do you think he realized it at any point in this movie? Like, in the throes of passion, he's like, "Oh no,
He probably knows.
I did it."
I could see him thinking that, but not mentioning it.
Yeah.
Like I could see him being like, "Yeah, this is probably like coming to that moment where you realize, yep, this is what's going to happen to me, and I know I'm not going to live." Sort of a thing.
What if this was all just like a frat boy challenge between John Connor and him, and he's like, "I'm gonna be your daddy." He's like, "No, you.
I'm gonna
no,
sleep.
you're not.
I'm gonna sleep with your mom.
No, you're not. I'm gonna sleep with your mom. My mom's dead."
I'm not going to pay a dime in child support.
Because I'll be long gone.
Was it worth it?
Yes.
Yeah, but I agree. I feel more sympathy towards her in the situation. I didn't feel much when he died, but yeah, you did feel sad for her because he was gone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say, like, I was kind of not middling. I was positive on this movie until the finale, which I feel like just affirms it as a stone cold classic.
Yeah.
I was watching this movie and being like, yeah, this is fine, but it's definitely suffering from a case of the 80s.
Yeah.
Where it does until the end. Yeah, it's definitely a straight out of the 80s type of movie.
Is so good.
But the end just really stamp of approval.
Yeah.
Like it just nails it.
Yeah, I think what Cameron does well here is he really walks the tightrope of, this kind of ending where you could easily overstay your welcome. It's like, okay, end it already. Like you're dragging out the resolution or the final twist, or is it dead or is it still alive? It happens a couple times, but he really does a good job of knowing when to push the tension and let it ease back on it.
Right.
Whether or not the Terminator is actually dead finally this time or this time or this time. It's just enough where it's
Yeah.
just keeping you on the edge of your seat to see it to the end. And
Yes, and the movie is wisely a tight hour 45 minutes. Like it you're totally right. It does not overstay its welcome. There's a couple of times where you're like, okay, how long is this going to go on? But just when you're starting to think that it moves on, like it's super well paced. It's not bloated in any way,
but not too lean either. I think
No.
hour 45 to hour 55 is like just peak timing for movies.
yeah, it's impressive. I just think it's impressively paced. There's not a boring moment in this movie for me.
Well.
There's David, there's imperfect moments, but not boring moments. I don't think this. You said it lulls. I don't think this movie lulls.
There is a lull in the middle compared.
I don't think
to,
there's a lull. I think it because in the back of my mind, I'm constantly like, oh, where's the Terminator when this is happening? Like, what's going on? Like, when is he gonna burst through the room and just cause chaos? I'm not saying I'm giving this movie a 10 out of 10. I'm just impressed with what it's able to do.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
With the resources provided, and yeah, I could see why this started a huge franchise.
Yes.
That's all.
Oh yeah.
Like a lot of people like to lay the credit at T2's feet, but Terminator 1 I think gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah.
When it did really lay the groundwork for
Right.
excellence, in my opinion. So I'm trying. My whole thing was like trying to reckon with how much of the franchise can I associate with this one versus the second one? Like the
success.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
and
you couldn't have that one without this one, so that's a point for
It's
this
a
one.
time loop.
yeah,
By the way, I just learned looking up a little bit about like the body of the Terminator. They made a skin for Fortnite last year, where it's like the Terminator.
Fortnite.
I just it's the whole reason I brought this up is how ingrained in culture this is.
well,
the people playing Fortnite.
he's also a playable character in Mortal Kombat. The Terminator.
Oh,
yeah.
you're right.
Look,
yeah.
think about how many kids though are going to be like, "That's a cool robot skin," and not know this
a
movie.
lot of them.
Sadly,
But then a number of
sadly,
them-
a lot of them.
I know.
I think a number of them will know, and those that don't know will find out.
They
Kinda like
will.
Star
Yeah,
Wars.
they
The
will.
ones
They
that
will
do
come
know.
to know.
Yeah.
They'll come to know.
Come to know Terminator.
All right. Any final thoughts on the Terminator at this point until we close this out and talk about the other portion of this podcast?
So unrealistic. You can't buy fully automatic weapons in California.
Man, they made that easy, didn't they?
It's a good point.
I love that scene, by the way. That I think that is one of the it's like the birth of the Arnold Schwarzenegger one-liner, where what was the line? He's like, "You can't do that," or the gun seller's like, "Oh, what does he say? Why? This is a clutch moment, and I'm forgetting the line."
I'm looking it up.
But he says, "You're wrong," or something like that.
Which part?
No, when
With
he's
the
buying the
shop?
It's
gun.
when he loads
You
the
can't
gun
do.
in
He's
the
just
store.
like, you can't do that here.
Yeah.
And then he aims a gun at him and shoots him.
But
Yep.
then he says like, "Yes, I can," or something. Like it's like,
Oh,
you know what I'm saying? I'm
right,
forgetting
yeah.
the Schwarzenegger
Pretty
line.
sure he
Here we
just
go.
says wrong.
Oh, yeah, he does. He says, "You can't do that," and Terminator goes, "Wrong."
Wrong. Yeah.
He has the best line.
Wrong.
Well,
Like,
that
if you-
the now famous "I'll be back."
Yeah.
Yeah. it's
Original.
so
I mean,
good.
Arnie. His accent back then was even stronger then, and he had real trouble saying "I'll." The contraction.
Yeah.
And he wanted to change the line to like "I will" or something, and Cameron was like, no, insistent on it has to be this. And so, oddly enough, that one stupid line Arnie worked so hard for is now like one of his most recognizable.
And he comes back to it multiple times.
Next to Hasta la Vista.
Yep. Or get to the chopper.
Oh man, I can't wait for
Well,
that.
that's Predator.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just talking about
Like his
Terminator
all
or
the lines you know
Schwarzenegger
him
lines.
Oh, yeah.
by.
Just
yeah.
saying, Reese questioned me the other day. He was like, I think I made the quote. I was like, "Get to the chopper." And he's like, "Do you even know what that's from?" And I was like, "Yeah, obviously Legally Blonde." And he was like, "Ugh."
You're right. You're
Yep.
right.
Remember when Elle Woods gets inside the chopper to go to Harvard? Come
Yeah,
on.
I remember.
All right. Any final thoughts on The Terminator before we close this out and go into the second portion of this podcast?
We'll be back.
I'll take that as a no. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and on the other end of this break, we will get into our brief reviews with numbered scores, along with what critics thought, talk some box office, and close out with a little bit of franchise talk. So we'll see y'all then.
Welcome back.
I could feel your buildup. You're like,
You knew it was going to happen.
You gotta take a big
deep
inhale.
breath. Yeah.
Yeah, deep breath before the Arnold.
Welcome back.
welcome back.
Welcome back. Let's talk The Terminator. David, you've got our reviews and numbered scores there in a bowl. You want to pull them at random?
I have the reviews with them. I only got the number score.
Eh.
All right. First
Yeah,
up.
just read it out on that tiny scrap of paper.
All right. First up is AJ, somebody who's notorious, I feel like, recently for going last in my random polls.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
You got to say the score?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you were like, wow,
what's
Take it away, AJ.
looking at all of us.
Dramatic buildup.
AJ with an 8.
All right.
Hey, nice.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I don't actually have a whole lot to say about this movie, and I think I'm afraid to because I don't know how to overcome the recency bias. And what I mean by that is approaching this classic movie, in the 80s are kind of just distant enough to us right now where it's oldish and classic, but still, relevant to, I guess, social trends. That's, I don't know, it seems like a modern story, but with older filmmaking techniques, technology and stuff. So I think, some of the criticism that has been brought up is basically the visuals and the special or the visual effects, prosthetics and stuff, and how it doesn't necessarily hold up to scrutiny, visually if some of that stuff might bother you. But overall, the tone and feel and the emotion that this movie imparts on you is tremendous. It's got this energy about it that is unique, yet, we see so much inspired by this, this iconic Terminator figure that we see both in the flesh and the endoskeleton, the metal robot. That's both of those versions are, I don't want to say traumatic, but they are impactful. They leave this impression on you. And that's what this movie conveys, and that's the legacy of it, really. And we'll even talk about that further as this, clearly is a multi-part franchise, that this legacy is very prominent. And the sci-fi aspect of it, the time travel and stuff, from a modern day doesn't necessarily seem new, but, for the time, from what I've read, is this was pretty ambitious. And especially, I don't know, we didn't really talk about it too much, but the uphill battle this kind of faced is, it was almost relegated to B-movie status, and it really exceeded and broke those barriers, beyond expectations, beyond classification, or just being relegated to something mediocre. And that's what's awesome about this movie. So I think the detractors beyond that really lie in the character of Kyle Reese, and I wanted to see more emotional depth from him and that connection to Sarah. He was a bit one-dimensional, and I think there was an aspect or an opportunity for a bit more character depth from him, and especially some of the dialogue that they had is, I think it would have been very welcome to have a bit more developed feelings between them, and could even, inform Sarah's character later on, and even John Connor later on as well. So that's the biggest missed opportunity, in my opinion, is the character of Reese, because, later in the franchise and even now, he's pretty largely forgettable.
Yeah.
Dang, you're going to roast our host like that?
Sorry.
Largely forgettable, quote, AJ?
Emphasis on large.
Thanks. Double.
Big old fat Reese coming your way.
Just kidding. So, yeah.
All right. Next up.
Oh, man. I don't know how to do my role today.
Who am I?
Next up is Noah
Hey,
with an 8.5.
All right. I like
that's
it.
me. That's me. I really, really like this movie. I think while a lot of people can't really get behind the fact that it's, or not get behind the fact that it's 80s, but more, have trouble
With how it's aged.
with how it's aged. I personally do not. I mean, sure, there might be some awkwardness, but I can easily put myself in a position of enjoying it the same way I can
Phrasing.
a modern movie. Wow, man, I'm just getting. That
your
would
turn.
that would be another.
No, it was me
phrasing,
on the Sucker
but-
Punch episode as I edited it. There were
yeah.
so many phrasings called on me.
Oh,
in
that was the
episode.
episode we did that.
Yes.
Well, regardless, while I can never really understand how they felt when this came out exactly, I can still really enjoy it the same way that I can enjoy a modern movie. I've never really had too much of a problem with that, except in the form of things like Labyrinth and puppets, and I hate puppets.
Never-ending story.
Never-ending story.
What if I told you the Terminator is technically a puppet?
Yes, and that I was going to mention that. That's the one point where I was like, that's a little odd, but at the same time, it's such a good scene that it's hard to, really be critical of that. So I really like this. The practical effects are great. I love all of the one-liners. Yeah, sure. Reese could be, a little more developed.
I agree.
That's all I can say as a negative for the movie. I don't mind that it's in the 80s. In fact, I kind of like it. It allows me to enjoy it from a different angle, I guess. Anyways, 8.5. I'll keep that.
Sweet.
All right. Next up, Irina, also with an 8.5.
Nice.
Yeah, I was kind of going between 8 and 8.5. I bumped it up to 8.5 because I think it does have that kind of uncharted territory factor to it that I'm just kind of used to at this point, where time travel and multiverses are all the rage now, so it feels very familiar. But at the time, this movie was something new to behold, really. Other than that, I think the character of Reese definitely was kind of a drag on the whole story. He was necessary, but he was still a drag. And I wanted there to be a bit of trade-off between him and Sarah, where she does get her initiative at the end, but I wish there was something about her, kind of her humanity, that was kind of a source of solace for him, or like he's battle hardened, but she has this sense of maybe fun and life that he didn't have where he was in the future. So I think a little bit of that back and forth would have created something special, even though their time together is very short. I think that would have made the relationship more impactful to me. That's really the only concern I have. I don't have any problems with the special effects because, hey, they had a limited budget. They did actually really well with what they could do. So, and it really doesn't take me out of the experience that much. So I actually like that aesthetic as well.
Yeah, agreed.
It's fun to watch something from the 80s and their special effects, especially when you're thinking of it more as an art form in special effects than trying to be hyper realistic. So I not too many criticisms. I do think there's room to grow, and it does feel like a part of a whole.
Yeah.
If I only had this movie, I would be kind of sad because there's a whole world in it that hasn't been explored that I really, really want to see.
That said, I also think if this movie it was the only one that it existed, it'd be that VHS that you dusted off in the movie store that
Right,
oh
yeah.
guys, y'all gotta see this thing. It's like
Oh yeah.
it's cool.
No,
you
it would
know?
definitely
Like-
be kind of like a word of mouth thing where
Yeah.
people would say, "Oh, you haven't seen Terminator? We need to watch it," kind of
Yeah.
thing. But it's essentially doing what a lot of franchises have tried to do, where they incorporate a prequel to an event.
Yeah.
And they instead knew where to start. And this is the prequel to further films.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that it feels complete in that way. There's something about prequels that really bugs me. It makes me feel like they're trying to perfect a series in retrospect and not, actually follow through with a well thought out story.
Yeah.
So I appreciate where it is, and I'm allowing there some room to grow. So 8.5.
Cool.
All right. Next up, Reese with a 9.
Hey, nice.
Yeah, and I will tell you, my score went from 8 to 8.5 to 9.
You just talked yourself up.
The more I thought about it, I was kind of dismissive of the movie when we watched it together, as like, yeah, I don't know, like really good. I get where this came from, and I get why people like it, but it's no T2.
You didn't watch it in the right atmosphere either.
Yeah, and then I started thinking about it and doing my research on it and watching parts of it again, and I'm like, no, I am shortchanging this movie. Like there's so much in it, and it's partially of me just like taking my brain and shipping it back to 1984.
Mm-hmm.
This was before Back to the Future, by the way. So this was a year before Back to the Future. Time travel movies weren't really a thing. This was kind of the big entry into that genre. And I just started being more and more excited by what this movie was putting out. And everything. And I think it's almost a disservice to say that this is a weaker movie in the franchise. I'm not saying it's a weaker movie, but when it does so much legwork and it accomplishes so much on it, and it had a budget, but it wasn't a huge budget, but it does so much with so little, and there's so many ideas on display throughout this movie that I'm like, oh, that's creative. This is and you can see the genius of Cameron working through this movie, where every scene is an idea that is unique, that is brought to life. I'm not saying it's executed perfectly. There's definitely problems with this movie, hence why I'm not giving it a perfect score. I agree with y'all. I think Kyle Reese is kind of a weak character. He does the best he can, but it's a lot of just like shouting things that are important to the plot, but don't really let you into this guy's actual character.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton are so strong in these roles that it kind of overcomes anything he's doing or any of the weaknesses of the movie. Like these are titans of cinema in the making, in a way, where these are iconic characters. And I also think it works perfectly as a balancing act between a horror and an action movie. It is Halloween through the lens of a sci-fi apocalyptic action movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just it's so unique in that way. There's no movie like this, or there's no franchise like this. And I would just I have to give credit where credit's due. This really established something critical to the filmmaking in a way. And I'd be so sad if this franchise didn't exist.
Yeah.
I'd be like, it's and another shout out to just the effects and the action. I think the Terminator looks so cool. T2 didn't design this Terminator. The Terminator had the iconic Terminator design. It had Arnold. It had Linda Hamilton. It had all these things. A lot of people like to put Terminator 2 on a pedestal, but this one really laid the groundwork and had it. It is the iconic one when you actually think about it. T2 just managed to reach a huge audience. And spoiler, yes, I like T2 better. It's amazing. It's like a epic action movie of all time. But I love this movie. I love what it's able to do, and I was never bored by it. Sure, it's got cheesy moments. We didn't even talk about the music, but it has that iconic Terminator theme. all the rest of the filler music between the action sequences not as great. But yeah, just great movie. It's not perfect again, but credit where credit's due. The Terminator made things happen for this franchise, and I applaud it for that. So 9.0.
All right. And I guess that makes me last. David with an 8. I'm going to bump that up to an 8.5.
Nice.
Purely from something Irina said, which was sort of the iconic nature of this movie. It paved the way. It gets points for laying the groundwork for pretty much all action movies moving forward. I think on a whole, on its own, it's about an 8, but it deserves points for ingenuity, for coming up with creative solutions to things that people haven't figured out yet. You said that this movie had to come first to walk so T2 could run, but I think this one had to come first and walk for pretty much every moving forward to run, it definitely did some heavy lifting in terms of figuring out solutions to action movie problems
and creating a fan base. Honestly, I think it started here.
I think Arnold is iconic. I even think his performance is slightly underwhelming compared to what I thought it was going to be. I think Linda Hamilton killed it, literally. And Reese was obviously underwhelming, like every Reese in my life.
Thanks.
So I think...
Which is only one.
Oh.
Reese's Pieces?
You thought I was talking about you. Oh, my bad. No, this movie was really good. It held my attention. There was a slight lull in the middle for me specifically, but I really liked the plot. I liked the concept of the robot. So James Cameron, he's good. So
he is good.
I'm gonna give it an 8.5.
You say that like you're the first one to ever think James Cameron.
Have you heard of this guy named James Cameron?
That Jimmy, he's gonna do stuff.
He's gonna do things.
Keep an eye on
I
him.
promise you.
All the behind the scenes, they all call him Jim.
What a sage you are, David.
I'm ahead of my time.
Yeah. So if my math serves me correctly, we're heading for an 8.5, aren't we, AJ?
That's it. 8.5 for the Terminator. That ties it with Live Free or Die Hard, Eastern Promises, and Gattaca.
Dang, that's good company.
Yeah, that sounds right.
No, I think those movies should be saying like this is good company to be with the Terminator.
That's what I was about
It's a
to
win-win
say.
for everybody, honestly.
Above it, 8.6, we have Tropic Thunder and Good Morning Vietnam.
What a weird jump after 2 Vietnam movies.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that is weird.
And then 8.4, we have Reign of Fire and The Hateful Eight.
All right. Perfect. All right. I think that feels about right for me. I know there's going to be people who...
Oh, yeah. There's always going to be contention.
No, there's going to be
about
people
those things.
shaming us for having it this low. I know there's like hardcore fans
You
of
read
the
me the
Terminator.
scores, Reese, and we'll see how we land.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I kind of shot from the hip on this one, but...
Yeah, and that I would have it no other way. I do not want not genuine
let's pander,
scores from
guys.
us.
Let's pander. Everyone pander. This is a 10.
I will raise my score if you rate us 5 stars on Apple.
Oh, people can buy up the movie scores. Yeah, if there's a movie we've done that we gave it a lower score, you could buy up your score with reviews.
I will say one thing I told myself when we started this podcast is the one thing I want, or one of the things I am very, I don't know, I believe in is just give the score you feel for the movie from your heart.
That's why I love Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
Yeah,
7.
and I love that. And just be true to yourself.
Yeah.
Who cares what the consensus
A lot
for
of
this
it is
movie
intuition, and it's all based on how you're feeling in the moment.
You guys all tried to talk me down from that 7, by the way. I
We did.
remember. They literally, they're like, David,
Look,
think about this.
And I'm glad you
Think about
stuck.
this.
I'm glad you stuck with your guns.
Doubled down.
Oh,
and
I
it's
wanna-
become a staple.
I want to say, he said in his review, this movie is very rewatchable.
Watched it 10
How
times.
many times have we watched it, David?
A million times.
A million. Yeah.
0.
I'm pretty sure.
right.
I'm pretty
Speaking
sure I
of
say
millions.
that. I'm pretty sure I say that in the episode 2. You said it was rewatchable, and I was like, okay, this time next year we're gonna check back,
I think you did say that.
Dude,
yeah.
and,
Let's have a
we're gonna
watch
see how many
party.
times you watched.
Why
it.
aren't we constantly doing
let's
a
all
watch party
it
on this?
together. We'll watch
should.
it together, and we'll
Alright,
see how
guys.
you feel.
I definitely think we should save this for a Patreon thing where it's like we will all rewatch and give new scores for.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds
To your credit, though, we do this about every week. We don't give ourselves that much time to do a rewatch.
And we watch other stuff.
And
It's hard.
And there is, as bad as it is, there is a level of watchability to it.
Compared
Yes.
to some of these other ones we've watched, we've learned.
I will say there are worse movies.
Yeah.
All right. We gave it an 8.5. But what did critics think? Let's move on.
5.
On Rotten Tomatoes, this movie has a rare distinction. It is one of the few movies to have a consensus of 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Whoa.
Yep. 66 reviews. So it's not just a few reviews. There's a bunch of reviews for this movie. Has 100%.
I gotta say, I was thinking of my score with the second one in mind, too.
Yeah. And audiences, kind of not too far behind, 89% for the Terminator. On Metacritic, the movie has 84, which is universal acclaim. Even though it says 84, that's like the distinction is that's universal acclaim. If it gets like 81 or above, Metacritic's weird. Audiences on Metacritic gave it a 7.6. On IMDb, it has an 8.1.
That's good for IMDb.
Yes. So overwhelmingly positive for the Terminator, more so than even I was expecting.
Well,
I checked this late in the game and was kind of shocked by just how universally loved the first Terminator is. I thought this would be what we would see for T2, not T1.
And, this is the case for all these, numeric ratings, but especially the methodology for Rotten Tomatoes. The tomato meter, the freshness. I feel like it has a bit of trouble with older movies because, aggregating those reviews at the time that were just in print and newspapers, local publications, and not, online.
And I do this from time to time, but just explaining how Rotten Tomatoes works. Your average moviegoer will go to Rotten Tomatoes and see 100 and think that, oh wow, everyone thought this movie was a 10 out of 10. No, that's not the case. All 66 of those Terminator reviews could be critics giving it a 7 out of 10, which is a passable score, so it goes in their database as positive. It's very much if it's positive, 100%, if it's negative, 0%. So, like, if a critic gives a movie a 5 out of 10, technically goes as negative, that in their algorithm goes in as a 0. So,
yeah. Well, you can go and look at the granular, numeric rating, your traditional rating, but that one number rating that is associated with Rotten Tomatoes, the freshness,
and
that's how that works.
Yeah, and I was actually reading the Terminator reviews for this just to break down that 100% score on Rotten Tomatoes. And a lot of them were kind of in line with us where it was like, oh, wow, this movie was revolutionary for the time. Yeah, it's not perfect, it's cheesy and stuff, but man, we love it. So it's like 100% sounds like, wow, a little high, but when you actually break it down and look at those reviews, it's kind of consistent with what we thought.
Yeah.
So. Moving on to box office. This movie released wide on October 26th in 1984. Also playing at the time were a bunch of movies y'all probably won't recognize. Terror in the Aisles, Body Double, Places in the Heart, and Thief of the Hearts. A lot of hearts going on.
I really thought I would at least recognize one of those.
I bet when you said that, he was thinking, oh, I'm going to know one of these.
Because
I know 80s
David, you look at
movies.
everything as a challenge.
I'll admit when I'm wrong, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't release kind of off-season, or wasn't like, holiday.
Yeah, October. It's not the summer movie season, not like T2 was, where it was just a big summer breakout.
Right.
Movie was budgeted at $6.4 million, which and this will be an adjust to inflation since it was an 80s movie. That adjusts to $18.2 million in today's dollars. So, worldwide, what did this movie make inflated? So we're going to inflate the number. What do you think this movie would have made its amount in today's dollars? AJ, I'll start with you.
Dollars. You said
so. Budget was $6.4 million, which inflates to $18.2 million.
150.
150.
Man, that was my guess.
All right, Noah.
Can I know what Jaws was?
No.
I don't have it offhand.
Well, that's
sorry.
also the 70s, too.
No, I know it's the 70s, but it can give me a good, like,
reference.
okay,
I-
this one
I-
was really good.
I can just tell you that Jaws was bigger.
Yeah.
That's all I
actually-
say.
Jaws. Bigger. Big shark.
I'll say 130.
Okay, so AJ 150, Noah 130, Irina.
I'm going to go higher. I'm going to say 164.
All right, David.
All right, let's just take our foot there and shove it on the pedal. We're going to 300.
Oh, wow.
300. Irina 164.
Damn it.
Yes.
David 300.
Yeah.
Irina's closer.
Dang it.
Yeah.
What was it?
So it made 78 million worldwide at the time. That inflates to 223 million.
Oh,
dang.
man, that was close.
it
though.
was kinda close.
The other number I had in my head was 200,
Yeah,
but
you
not
deserve this
223. But
Yeah. So it was close, but Irina edges out the win there. Yeah, 223 million inflated dollars back in the day, 78 million, which
It's not the first time David got edged out.
so think about back in the day, 6.4 million budget. That is not a small budget, but it is definitely not a big one for what they were putting on screen here. What?
so what was it not inflated?
6.4.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that inflates to 18.2. Which is still not big. Like if you
No, I mean like the final amount.
70.
so 78 was the original for the worldwide, and
Gotcha.
223 is the inflated.
Right. Gotcha.
So yeah, definitely this would be the equivalent of Blumhouse today.
Mm-hmm.
They release a lot of low budget horror movies that are pretty high in quality, and then they maximize on that low budget by having in the grand scheme of things, you would look at the number and be like, oh yeah, it did pretty well, but then you look at the budget and it's like, oh wow, it did really well.
Name a big movie from Blumhouse.
So most recently, The Black Phone. That movie cost something like 18-20 million, and it's currently grossed, I want to say almost 140 million.
So it's on pace to meet Terminator kind of
It's not going to get that high, but you get the idea.
This might be weird, but thinking about The Black Phone, which we watched, I feel like I would have liked it better if it was actually made in the 80s.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
No, I
Dude,
agree.
Can you imagine the practical effects they would use? Oh man.
Well,
No.
the scrappiness of the acting and just the way the plot is constructed.
Yeah,
I could
it's
see
like it would be more effective if I knew it was from the 80s.
Yeah. I think a good comparison to today is that movie Upgrade. Have y'all seen that one?
No.
Okay.
No.
Also a Blumhouse, I believe, but it's about a guy who has like an implant put into him that gives him like abilities to fight people. It's like a gory, scrappy, low budget movie.
Interesting.
But it's kind of similar to this, where it's just they did a lot with a little. Anyway, yeah, very impressive box office. Obviously, this kind of, I don't know, raised some eyebrows, and people are like, whoa, there's something to this, because this movie wasn't projected to do that well. It was one of those where it's like, all right, let's dump this movie out there.
in October.
Yeah, we'll see how it
GM was
does.
like, all right, whatever, just another one.
And its opening, actually, when you look at it, it's like, oh, that was number one with it, because I think it opened to around 4 to 5 million, which is not a lot, but it got number one because it edged out all these other no-name movies, and it also repeated in the second weekend, won number one at the second weekend, so it had 2 weekends atop the box office, and it legged out, and obviously created this fan base for this movie.
Back in the day, it does feel like when big movies like this came out, it was almost easier too, because you still had other movies that just like these no-name movies. Nowadays, it feels like everybody is, making big movies, like even the worst movies are okay. I feel like back then you go into a movie like, oh, this is not good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so did really well. Like it's not like the a huge breakout, but it did much better than expected. Obviously, getting those 2 number ones both weekends in a row really showed that it had staying power,
Right.
and there was interest in this universe. Weirdly enough, though, we didn't get a sequel to this it took just under a decade for James Cameron to come back around to the series. It's funny because Arnold Schwarzenegger started off not being interested in this franchise, but really started to grow attached to it once he became involved in it.
Yeah.
And he was actually just blowing up James Cameron like, hey, when's Terminator 2?
When are we going to do the second one?
When are we going to do Terminator 2?
7 years.
Yeah, that's not like today. If you have a successful sequel,
That's
it's
kinda-
instantly put into
I
production.
don't know. That's kind of cute.
Yeah,
though.
no, I know. And they're apparently friends. Like, they get along really well.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, there was an interview I watched where it was just put them both in a room and they were talking about Terminator, and it was just, they seemed like a couple of old buddies who were just like, oh yeah, remember Terminator 1? Man, you were writing the Kyle Reese character, and that's who I was auditioning for, but we both secretly were like, oh, I'd be good at Terminator. And it was just this.
I love
Arnold's
that.
like, this is the movie that brought me onto the stardom. And James was like, this is the movie that brought me out into the stardom.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect impressions there. But yeah,
That was the
Terminator.
Bill Paxton character, right?
Oh gosh, I forgot to mention him.
Yeah, he gets killed. I'll just say that.
No, yeah. When Reese he paused the movie when we were watching, he's like, you know who that is? I was like, I have no idea. And when he said Bill Paxton, that was the last person I would have guessed.
Yep.
I love his
Really?
tooth
The
gap.
last person?
I don't know. Betty White was right next to it.
Well, the thing about that
pretty
scene
close.
was, this is something I love about 80s movies, is they always have a troop of hooligans somewhere in it.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, we
And
gotta
it's-
say it though.
And it just what?
I've been doing too much toot. Yes.
Howard the
But-
Duck.
It's just they always have them there, and it feels like an older generation commenting on a younger generation where like, yep, this is what they all act like and look like, and they're all a bunch of idiots.
And for the record, they definitely were doing too much toot. I could tell.
Whatever that means.
We all knew.
But yeah, the franchise lay dormant for a good 7-8 years. But it was still breathing, and we finally got Terminator 2 in 1991,
I'm excited to watch it now.
which is the next episode of this podcast. It's a big one, guys. Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
A few times where we do a sequel, and that's the big one.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
This is the movie that was most talked about in middle school, high school as like just the formative movie for a bunch of my dude friends. And I'm not saying it doesn't, like, women can't like this movie either. Obviously, it's a great movie universally, but it was a big awakening for a lot of guys. I feel
The
like.
way you say that, I don't.
No, in terms of
I
like
had such a big awakening at Terminator 2.
And nudity in the beginning.
True. But yeah, a seminal action movie. I'm really excited to revisit it. I haven't actually watched it in a very long time, which is weird because I like it.
Watch party.
We definitely have to
This
make that
sounds
work
like
this time.
next week conversation, though.
Okay, this time let's be better coordinated. We're going to make this thing happen. We're going to watch this thing together. Next week, Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Goodbye.
I'll be back.